Have you heard about a city with 4 kings? Did you know that there was a Yorùbá city that formally established a form of republican government way back in 1898? A government where the power structure and decision-making processes were decentralized. Today, we are heading to a unique Yorùbá city with not one, not two, but 4 kings. You heard that right. Abeokuta, ìlú àwọn Ẹ̀gbá, is a city with a rich history, deep culture, and an incredible story of resilience. But wait, why does Ẹ̀gbá have 4 kings? If you've watched the recent Netflix movie featuring Lateef Adedimeji as Lishabi, then you're already beginning to connect the dots about the rich history tied to Abeokuta. But let's break it down even more. Egbaradi, because it is going to be a wild ride of history, politics, and leadership. Abeokuta, which literally means under the rock, is a city that found its identity around the iconic Olumo Rock. It is the heart of the Ẹ̀gbá people and home to 4 kings. You see, the Ẹ̀gbá didn't always live in Abeokuta. They founded the city around 1830, having fled from the old Oyo Empire's oppressive rule and the threat of the Dahomey Kingdom. Seeking refuge, they settled in the area surrounding the massive Olumo Rock, which provided a natural fortress against invasions. Now, the 4 communities that make up Abeokuta didn't just come from nowhere. The first group, Ake, traces its origins to the ancient Oyo Empire. The Gbagura also claim descent from Oyo, but have their own separate leadership. Then you have the Okeono, who also broke away from the Oyo Empire. And finally, the Owu, who fought bitter wars with Oyo despite their strong ties. They ended up settling in Abeokuta after their defeat in the Owu War. So how did all these groups come together? That's where Lishabi and Shodeke come in. Lishabi, a courageous leader of the Ẹ̀gbá people, led the charge against the oppressive rule of the Oyo Empire's tax collectors, the Ajeles and the Ilari, who were agents of the empire. Lishabi is remembered as a liberator. Although he lived before the founding of Abeokuta, his spirit of resistance laid the foundation for what Shodeke would eventually do. Shodeke, the war chief, guided all these groups, Ake, Gbagura, Okeono, and Owu, to Olumo Rock after years of war and displacement. Together, they created a confederacy, united by a common desire for safety and self-governance. Each group, Ake, Gbagura, Okeono, and Owu, retains its own leadership with its own king. They cooperate in a confederacy that respects each king's authority, but also shares responsibilities across the community. These kings, Alake of Ake, who is also known as Alake of the entire Ẹ̀gbá land, Agura of Gbagura, Oshile of Okeono, and Olowu of Owu, represent the unity and strength of Abeokuta's origins. One of the fascinating aspects of Ẹ̀gbá political system was the role of the Ogboni. They were a secretive but powerful council that acted as both spiritual and political overseers. The Ogboni institution was integral to maintaining balance in governance, providing a check of the absolute powers of the kings, and making critical decisions on matters of war, peace, and justice. You could call it an early form of democracy, traditional African style. Here's a remark of Commander Forbes quoted in Church Missionary Intelligencer of October 1853 about Abeokuta's kings. Abeokuta has 4 presidents. Each town has a Warefa, or civil council of 6, and on an average 20 Ogboni or magistrates. It has also, according to its size, 1, 2, or 3 Baloguns or military chiefs. Hence, they are in office, taking the towns at 140 to 840 principal rulers or a House of Lords, 2,800 secondary civil chiefs or House of Commons, 140 principal military chiefs, and 280 secondary ones. And I hold this to be the most extraordinary republic in the world. But let's not forget the war stories. The Ẹ̀gbá people had to fight fiercely for their new home. One of their biggest challenges came in 1851 when the kingdom of Dahomey, under King Gizo, tried to storm Abeokuta. Now, the Dahomeans were known for their aggressive tactics, but the Ẹ̀gbá people were ready. Imagine this, thousands of Dahomey warriors, including their famous all-female unit, the Amazons, descending on Abeokuta, but the Egba defended their city like true warriors, aided by the British who supplied ammunition. The Egba women also played a crucial role in supporting their warriors during the battle. In his book, The Egba and Their Neighbors, Professor Saburi Abeokuta highlights the contribution of the women. The Egba owed their victory to the zeal of their women, who attended to the wounded and kept the front line supplied with food and water, and to the tireless energy and example of the missionaries. Their contributions were essential to the Egba's victory, demonstrating the collective effort involved in resisting Dahomey's invasion. Abeokuta wasn't just defending itself, it was defending its independence and right to exist, and they managed to push back even stronger forces. Their victory over the Dahomey made Abeokuta a powerhouse in the region. But just when the Egba were finding their feet, here comes the British. When the British showed up in the mid-1800s, everything began to shift. At first, the relationship between the Egba and the British was friendly. Missionaries like Henry Townsend set up schools and churches, introducing Western education and Christianity. Townsend even helped spread the use of the printing press in Yorùbá land. But as you might expect, the British government had a different agenda. The British didn't just come with trade, they brought colonial structures that overturned the traditional systems. Though Abeokuta maintained its confederacy for a while, the British eventually imposed their colonial rule, altering the balance of power between the kings and the Ogboni. Facing prices and potential shortages of cotton from America, particularly during the American Civil War, the British saw the Egba as a potential new source of raw cotton. The Egba already possessed the knowledge and skills for cotton cultivation and processing, so the British encouraged them to expand their production, viewing legitimate commerce in cotton as a way to displace the slave trade. The British also wanted to control the region because of its booming palm oil trade, and they saw Abeokuta as a strategic location. You know how they do. At first, the Egba resisted. They said, "Nah, we don't want your interference." But over time, the British influence grew, especially after they introduced something called indirect rule. So what is indirect rule? Well, yeah, let's break it down. Instead of taking over directly, the British let the traditional rulers like the Alake and the other kings maintain their power, but under the British supervision. While the kings were still ruling, they had to report to the colonial officers. It was like giving them power, but at the same time taking it away. That's Frederick Lugard for you. He's the guy behind the indirect rule system. By the late 1800s, the British gradually imposed indirect rule. They didn't abolish the kings, but they started using them as instruments of colonial governance. The kings became figureheads with real power, slowly slipping into the hands of British colonial officers. The indirect rule system gave the British control over the Egba territory without a full-on takeover. They introduced taxes, infrastructure, and Western legal systems, but also undermined traditional authority. But beyond politics, the British also introduced Western education and Christianity to Abeokuta, and this opened up new opportunities. Abeokuta became one of the first places where Western-style education thrived, thanks to missionaries like Henry Townsend. In fact, Bishop Samuel Ajayi Crowther, who translated the Bible into Yorùbá, played a big role here too. So Abeokuta evolved into a place where tradition met modernity. It's a city that embraced change, but at its core, it still values its rich cultural heritage. Despite the colonial control, Abeokuta remained a Yorùbá city and thrived as a cultural hub. To today, these four kings still reign, each representing the legacy of the Egba people. Speaking of legacy, do you know that some of Nigeria's greatest icons came from this city? Let me give you a quick roll call. Funmilayo Ransom Kuti, Fela Anikulapo Kuti, Chief Moshood Kashimawo Abiola, Chief Olusegun Obasanjo, Professor Wole Soyinka, Chief Ebenezer Obi Fabiyi, Tunde Kilani, Pastor Tunde Bakare, and many more go to show that Abeokuta is not just a city of kings and warriors, it's also a city of icons who have shaped Nigeria and the world. So what can we learn from Abeokuta, this Yoruba city with 4 kings? First, it teaches us the power of unity. Even with different leaders, the Egba people found a way to build a strong and cohesive community. Second, it shows us that no matter how much change or external influence comes, a people can hold on to their identity and thrive. And that's Abeokuta, the city under the rock, where 4 kings rule in harmony. Ashawa Oni Parun. Adebusuyi lorúkọ mi. Thanks for watching. If you love this episode, be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe. And stay tuned for more on our beautiful story. Olódùmarè ò ní kọ àtúnrí. See you in the next one.